End of the 19th century, in November 1899, two different men in the Kansas City area were both sent to insane asylums for very different reasons. W.L. Bailey of Atchison, Kansas, was taken to an asylum for being, quote, hopelessly insane as a result of nervousness and sleeplessness. On the other side of the state border, James J. Smith was sent for murdering his nephew after an alleged bout of paranoia. These two cases revealed that mental health treatment was not necessarily what we would recognize today in the 21st century, and that causes for commitment to that treatment could be quite varied. Now, treatment and also awareness of mental health are the topic of today's session, the first session of the Warnell Majors Institute, titled Mental Health in the 19th Century. Today, we'll be talking a bit about how mental health awareness and treatment changed over the course of the early 19th century to the late 19th century. We'll also be discussing some reform issues and some other general issues within the mental health treatment world. And finally, we'll touch a bit on the legacy of mental health treatment bridging into the 20th century. Mental health, as a quick note, has changed a lot, both before, during, and after the 19th century. Since the 19th century, a lot of terminology, a lot of diagnoses, and a lot of awareness has changed significantly, and some of the verbiage that I'll be using is not necessarily familiar to audiences today. I also want to note that though we may be able to theorize that certain historical figures had specific mental health or physical health issues, it's very difficult to actually retroactively diagnose people, so we will not be doing that today. As I mentioned, though, mental health awareness and treatment changed quite a bit both before and during the 19th century. Before the 19th century, mental health treatment was primarily performed at home by family members or by other people in a local community. But as the 19th century began and progressed, processes like urbanization and rising populations contributed to higher concentrations of people and greater pushes for reform movements, one of which was urban reform and another of which was mental health reform. Two advocates of mental health reform, primarily mental health treatment and awareness, were Dorothea Dix and Benjamin Rush. Dorothea Dix and Benjamin Rush were both advocates of what they called the moral treatment. The moral treatment was based on a belief that mental health was caused by physical defects, or a belief in the idea of phrenology, as opposed to heredity or the inheritance of such things. They advocated for the creation of state hospitals and of asylums for the insane, which would be run by people called alienists. At these asylums, people were generally committed against their will, either by family members or by courts. And at these asylums run by alienists, they were subjected to treatments such as bloodletting, frequent walking, hot and cold baths, purging, and physical restraints. The moral treatment declined in the middle of the 19th century due to a failure to deliver on its promises of curing mental health issues, but insane asylums and state hospitals for the mentally ill continued to exist throughout the 19th century, and they continued to grow more corrupt and more abusive. As people began to recognize this corruption and abuse in the state insane asylum system, many people, such as reformers and journalists, began to call for significant reform and new administrators, new neurologists, and new standards. These new standards were still quite dubious. They were still not necessarily up to today's standards. They imposed things like static electricity as a mental health treatment and also rest cures as a mental health treatment. Now, though, I want to turn to some common diagnoses that would be seen in these mental health state hospitals and asylums. The four most common diagnoses were addiction, nervous disorder, neurasthenia, and hysteria. Many of these diagnoses pertain specifically to women. For example, hysteria was exclusively a women's disease. And though understanding of it changed quite a bit, all of these diagnoses were rooted in generally a poor understanding of women's health and also of general health. There were some specific issues within the diagnostic world of mental health that we should talk about now. For example, women and soldiers were most commonly diagnosed with addiction to opium, which was a drug readily available in America and the rest of the world at this point. Women also had specific issues pertaining to their gender and sometimes to their class. Some historians argue, for example, that middle-class women and their relegation to the domestic sphere and to working in the home contributed to their development of mental health issues. This is something that was mirrored in a mid-20th century book called The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, where she argues that women developed mental health and physical issues as a result of being stuck at home. Veterans of the Civil War also developed quite quite often addictions to opium because that was used to treat their pain. And finally, one final issue in the mental health treatment world was the issue of the LGBTQ community. Some people used mental health issues and mental health conditions to target LGBT figures. One famous example of this, there are many others, came from the mid-20th century. Alan Turing, who was someone who worked during World War II on breaking codes, was arrested for, quote, indecency, and was only allowed to leave jail on probation if he accepted injections of estrogen to reduce what they called his libido. So you can see that mental health issues were often used to target different groups, and that different groups suffered differently because of mental health treatment during the 19th century. Now, I told you that we would talk a little bit about the reform movement. Here's one great story about probably the most famous mental health reformer from the 19th century, Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly was a pioneering investigative journalist from New York, from Cochrane's Mill, New York. She took a job investigating insane asylums during the 19th century. Specifically in 1887, she took this job, and she got herself committed to an insane asylum for women and spent 10 days in pretty deplorable conditions. She was forced to take iced baths, sit in wet clothing after taking those ice baths, which can contribute to illness. She was made to sit in silence for 12 hours at a time. She was tied down. She was forced to push heavy carts. She only had access to moldy and rotten food. She reported things on beatings, sexual assaults, psychological abuse, and she also reported that many of the inmates of insane asylums were in fact not insane or even mentally ill. They were simply immigrants who could not speak English and were, as a result of not being able to communicate with English reformers, forced into insane asylums. Her report, her groundbreaking report on insane asylum conditions, forced a lot of change, and she was one of the causes for the new standards and new administrators being input into the mental health system. Finally, I want to touch a little bit on the legacy of mental health treatment in America. Mental health and some of the issues that went along with it, such as the belief in the inheritance of mental health issues and of other physical health issues, contributed to the idea of social Darwinism, which was a belief in the survival of the fittest within a human society. This along with a reformist energy, gave rise to the later eugenics movement at the turn of the 20th century, which carried the misguided notion that human qualities were hereditary, and attempted to control for those what they called good qualities through heredity, through forced sterilizations of those deemed unfit. This included people with real mental illnesses, as well as others with either physical illnesses or other undesirable traits, according to the eugenicists. Both of these issues, social Darwinism and eugenics, are associated with the advocacy of white supremacy. So as you can see, our mental health awareness and treatment has changed quite a bit over the 19th century, and the issues that are incumbent upon mental health treatment during the 19th century gave rise to a lot of other things, a lot of other social movements and issues later, both in the 19th and 20th centuries. Thanks for coming with us today on this mental health awareness journey, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of the Warnell Majors Institute of this first session. Thank you.